me bring in now leader of the ANC in the Western Cape legislature, the official opposition, Cameron Dugmore. We've got DA Federal Chairperson, Dr. Ivan Meyer, and we've got the EFF Western Cape spokesperson, Dr. Wandile Kasibe. Good to have you, gentlemen, and thank you very much for your time and coming on this evening. Let's start with you, Cameron, here in the studio with us. I mean, a unitary state was a good idea for the ANC to be able to oversee the redistribution of resources. It's being argued now that that has not gone very well, in the sense that the ANC government has not been able to respond effectively to local demand and local conditions.
I think the first thing, thank you very much for the opportunity, the first thing that must be stated very clearly is that we have a national constitution which was adopted by democratically elected representatives 30 years ago. And that constitution says these are the powers of national government, these are the powers of provincial government, and these are the powers of local government. That is very, very, very clear. And in terms of that, the fundamental problem that we have here is that it's incorrect to try and steer this debate in a way which implies that it's some powers. The very beginning principle here is that the Western Cape legislature has 3 legal advisors. These are not ANC legal advisors, these are not DA legal advisors, these are legal advisors. And all 3 of them made it very clear that the very bill that the DA has brought is unconstitutional. So we must first put that the ANC today, nationally, rejected this bill, and the first basis is that it is unconstitutional. Yeah. So that we shouldn't forget. So what we're doing is actually wasting people's time, because everyone knows this bill will never become law. Yeah. The second thing I want to make is that our constitution does not provide for a federal country. We're a united South Africa with provinces and with municipalities that actually have certain powers. And the DA is in trouble now, so they're trying to spin that, oh no, this is just about devolution. But what we need to really understand here is that some of their leaders, like Mr. Tertius Simmers, who's their provincial leader, I see that he's probably nervous to come on the show. He says devolution is the path to federalism, is the path to Cape independence. Yeah. So, and they're doing that working with right-wing groups like themselves, Cape Exit, the Freedom Front. They actually kicked out the Freedom Front's bill, which was introduced by Peter Marais, and because they didn't want to be outdone, they came up with this bill, which cannot even be described as a bill. Yeah. Doesn't have a memorandum. So the issue here is there are mechanisms in the Constitution where the Premier of a province can say. So the issue here, which I just want to make clear.
Initial debate that you're bringing, those 2 things. Dr. Ivan, let's bring you in here. One, it's unconstitutional in the sense that there's no space for that in our Constitution. We are a unitary state with provinces and with local government. But 2, it's you're bringing cessation via back door. You're bringing federalism via back door.
Firstly, good evening to you and good evening to the listeners, and good evening to my 2 colleagues on the show this evening. Firstly, let me say that this is not an unconstitutional bill, because Section 99 of the Constitution, there are a number of constitutional provisions that allows provinces to have some power. Number 1, Section 99 of the Constitution allows for a situation that the national minister may devolve certain powers to a province or even to a municipality. So that's in the Constitution. Number 2, Section 119 of the Constitution say there are 3 ways that the legislature can introduce a bill. A cabinet member can. This is not a cabinet bill. A private member. This is not a private member. Thirdly, a committee. This is a committee bill. But more importantly, Schedule 4 of the Constitution says there are concurrent powers, meaning powers that the province may have and a national government may have. But there's also exclusive legislative powers, and there's another provision in the Constitution, Section 105, that says a provincial legislature like us in the province may approach the National Assembly to introduce legislation. And this is exactly what we are doing. So we are operating within the ambit of the constitutional provisions. And it is not up to the ANC to decide whether this bill will be passed or not. It is the will of the people of the Western Cape, because we know that the ANC is a failed, criminal, corrupt state, and we will not allow a failed state like the ANC to dictate to the people of the Western Cape. This bill is not about cessation. This bill is to allow for the powers that the Constitution says we can have to devolve it closer to the people. And so, this bill is to shield the citizens of the Western Cape from ANC failures. We want to be part of South Africa, but we do not want to be part of ANC failed governance.
All right. Dr. Wandile, let's bring you in here. You can weigh in as well. Is the desire of the majority of the population of the Western Cape to no longer be part of what Dr. Ivan Meyer calls ANC failures?
Yeah, thank you very much for having us, and greetings to my fellow panelists and the listeners or viewers. Listen, this bill is basically just it's a clandestine attack, attempt to create a pseudo-state out of the Western Cape. And the residents of the Western Cape, we reject this because it sets us, I think, a couple of decades back when this country was under apartheid. And we must condemn, really, the Democratic Alliance-led administration or government for its separatist political agenda, to which they seek to clandestinely separate the Western Cape completely from the rest of South Africa. This is against the spirit of the Constitution. There's the Constitution, there's a spirit upon which the Constitution was built. The Constitution was built on the spirit of uniting, the peoples of this country. And we can't sit here and, and endorse, a bill that will separate, our people. We are on a path to unite or to uniting the peoples of the Western Cape and the rest of South Africa. Yeah. So we can't have a bill that seeks to divide our people. And as the EFF would denounce this bill as well as warn against its weaponization against the spirit upon which the Constitution of South Africa was built.
So you are negating the whole entire argument they are bringing around the constitutionality, the laws that allow them to do this, and how they are bringing the bill, and the reasons, and that they want to bring the bill. And your focus is purely on their wish to live in an isolation.
No, you must understand, the first thing is that, the bill itself, it sets to create a grounds for, a creation of a separate state. And this is where we are, we're condemning, the Democratic Alliance. I mean, for the longest time, the DA and these white racists who have, been, in cahoots with imperialist forces, trying to almost use the Western Cape as a colony, through which they will then be able to create, a white-only state where white people will, establish their own conclave at the expense of the black, of the majority. And we're saying, look, the problem that we're facing here is that people, people such as these right, wingers who are supported by, of course, the Democratic Alliance, which is led by other, racist right wingers, these people have been emboldened. In fact, this is a spit in the face of those people who died for this constitution of this country, who died defending the unity of the South African and African people. And we must actually condemn this. And as the EFF, we reject this, and we encourage, in fact, we appeal and call on, progressive left and also the residents of the Western Cape to reject this bill, because it does not have any developmental, outcomes. It will basically benefit. It's basically meant to, to feed the interest of those, white exclusive, racists who, have been trying to actually separate, the Western Cape from the rest of South Africa. So they're using it as that excuse. And that's the EFF would reject it completely.
Cameron, let's bring you in here quickly. Let's try and move forward. You're saying Firstly, I mean, you can respond to all the bills that have been cited and how the process is being brought about and says within those powers, but then move on to talk about other options that can be exercised.
No, thank you very much. I think it's important that we know and understand the provisions of the Constitution. As I said before, now this will be the last time I'll make the point, 3 legal opinions have said the bill itself is unconstitutional. Ivan Meyer, the national leader of the DA, his party hasn't given any legal opinion which says that it's constitutional. So he says it's not unconstitutional, but his party in the committee, he admits it's a committee bill. They didn't give one legal opinion. So, but what he's talking about is something completely different. The Constitution, in the clauses that he's mentioned and in others, does allow, as I said, the Premier of a province to say, we believe as the Western Cape that this is a particular power. That doesn't need a bill. So that's the first fundamental thing we need to understand. And the reality is his Premier, the DA Premier of the Western Cape, have never followed the Constitution to make this or other argument. That's the first point. The real issue here is that they have powers. Now let's look at the powers that they have. You take education. When the ANC governed the Western Cape, we were the top performing province when it comes to matric. But over the years from 2009, they have neglected the poor schools in the metro, in the rural areas, in the both historical coloured and African areas. Safety is a problem at our schools. They are now number 5. They don't offer sufficient maths and science, so they have failed there. When it comes to health, 2 things. They closed down the GF Uester Hospital near Manenberg and Younger. They promised to build another one. That's within their powers. 10 years later, they haven't done it. They are rather standing up and saying they don't want the NHI, which is the path towards universal health care. So in those powers they failed. I want another power that they say they want, which they've never approached the President about the energy thing. Do you know that in the Western Cape, in Cape Town, Eskom provides direct power to some people and the city provides. But what the city does, they get the power from Eskom, they put a surcharge on it, higher than the nurse's surcharge. So when you go and buy Eskom power, you get for 100 Rand, you get almost 1/3 more units than when you buy from the city. So they are putting on a surcharge, but yet they're telling us they want the power of energy. They haven't thought this through. This is really reflects this nation. You want to blame and complain. You want to make an alliance with the right wing, as the EFF has indicated. Build this right-wing alliance. Invite discredited Zionist leaders to come to profile Dr. Death. This is what is actually at the core of, they are the remnants. The DA are the remnants of the apartheid legacy. This MEC that we're talking about here, let's talk about his portfolio, agriculture. Do you know that in the Western Cape, which is the worse than any other province, less than 3% of the agricultural land in this province are owned by black people, African, coloured and Indian. And when we asked him a written question in the legislature, he said, I'm not worried about those figures, go to the deeds office. That is the blatant. So what they're trying to do, they're trying to divide the black people generally and scare whites. Whereas actually, if you look at our country, we are united in our diversity. So what they are doing is just an election gimmick, but it's creating division, and it's actually beginning to alienate certain people. The Cape Exit, who they often talk with and meet with, in fact, John Steenhuisen promised Cape Exit a referendum in the last election if Cape Exit supporters voted for them. So they're working with these people, and that is the danger here. We need to unite this country. Clearly there are issues. We as the ANC have acknowledged. But take police, another power. Do you know that community police fora are supposed to exist all over? The DA, with their own budget, doesn't fund them and instead funds certain neighborhood watches, which divides the fight against crime. Our Constitution, secondly, says cooperative governance. What they are doing, from Helen Zille, John Steenhuisen, this MEC here, the Premier, they would rather fight. And I would argue that is negative to the people of the Western Cape. If we work with National, if we work, the Western Cape would benefit more. Yeah. That's what we're saying.
All right. Dr. Ivan, let's bring you in here. A chance to respond. You can respond to a number of issues. One is the question of the legal opinion and whether or not you have sought legal opinion for bringing this bill. Two, the alignment with what the EFF says are right-wing parties for a white regime agenda. And there are areas of land, your own portfolio, the question of CPF and how resources are distributed there, and the question of energy.
Yes. No, thank you very much, and thank you for those questions. The fundamental question is, what gave rise to this current bill? The Constitution, in various sections of the Constitution, gives powers and duties to the national government, to the provincial government, and to local government. Some sections are even specifically assigned to the national, provincial, or local government. There's also what I call concurrent powers, which is in Schedule 4, but the original drafters of the Constitution, I want to salute them because they foresaw a situation where the national government may fail in the execution of their duties.
Yeah.
And that's why the Constitution makes a case that in such situations, we can devolve certain powers to other spheres of government. I refer to Section 99, Schedule 4 and 5 of the Constitution, Section 105 of the Constitution.
Yeah.
So what is here at stake? The people of the Western Cape said, stop complaining about the ANC. You told us it's a corrupt, criminal, failed state. We accept that. Move beyond the critique of the ANC. Use your powers that you have in the Constitution. And we have said, let's identify the areas where the national government is failing the people of the Western Cape. So we identified those powers. Firstly, trade. Very important. Trade is a power and a function where the ANC is failing South Africa. We have no real fundamental preferential trade agreements.
Give us an example. Let's broaden that a little bit. When you're saying complete failure in trade, what are you talking about?
Well, let us look at many of the countries that we are exporting to, that we have trade relations. Many of these countries, we don't have preferential trade agreements. Countries like China and India, Philippines, Indonesia, many countries in Europe, even some African countries, they have preferential trade agreements with many of it because we have an incompetent government to facilitate preferential trade agreements. Number two, the second area where this bill focuses on is on our harbours. I'm the MEC for agriculture. I must make sure that we increase our agricultural exports, but with the harbours under the ANC mismanagement, farmers and producers are losing millions of rands because they simply cannot manage the harbours. The next point is exports. I am responsible for 55% of South Africa's primary agricultural exports. The ANC is failing us, so this will take up that space. Another issue is the issue of electricity provision. And so we say, give us the power to generate electricity, to distribute it, and to reticulate energy. Another issue is policing and public transport. So in those specific areas, we don't grab power. We say the Constitution allow us to negotiate with the national government these powers, and I think our colleagues are also incorrect. This is not a bill that grabs these powers. This is a bill that creates a framework for cooperative governance. And so what this Western Cape government say, this bill is to say, stop complaining about the ANC. 2, use your constitutional and legal instruments. 3, protect the citizens of the Western Cape from ANC corruption and failed state. And 4, refuse to allow the ANC government to take us down to their level.
Okay.
We say we support the devolution of powers and protect the citizens of the Western Cape. This is not about a right-wing apartheid. I think my friend from the EFF will know that the Constitution will not make it legal or constitutional for any party to bring back apartheid. So that is something that should not be on the table. It's illegal, unconstitutional. Nobody will accept it. And anything of cessation, we want to be part of South Africa. We are part of South Africa, but we're not going to be part of ANC corruption, ANC failed state, and ANC criminal state. That is the situation. Stop complaining, move on, grab the powers that is in the bill through a framework of cooperative governance. The National DG of Transport said it is possible to devolve transport powers to either the metropolitan city or to a province. So I think that is the good thing.
Yeah.
There is some movement in the ANC, and the ANC must not tell me they will not approve this bill.
Yeah.
The ANC is an outgoing government. They will not be in power in June, and so we will take this bill to the new National Parliament and the new National Cabinet, and this bill will be on the first desk of the new government after the election. You don't draft the bill because the ANC don't like it. The ANC is an outgoing government. A new government will support this bill after the election.
It's a good idea for some powers in trade, policing, harbours, to be devolved to the provincial government. Let's bring in the EFF here. Dr. Wandile, the question of apartheid doesn't even begin to come in because our constitution guarantees that there will be no return of apartheid. However, this is an appeal for cooperative governance in particular functions of trade, of policing, controlling the harbours, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, listen, it's difficult to listen to someone hallucinating here. And it's quite ironic at the same time because he's a member of a party that is led by, an apartheid denialist and somebody who has called, blacks from the Eastern Cape refugees in the Western Cape, somebody who has, endorsed and said, and basically, gave good, almost like, endorsed colonialism as a project that had positive, outcomes, in the name of Helen Zille. So when he mentions that, apartheid and that it's unconstitutional, but the Democratic Alliance itself is led by people who have endorsed apartheid, people who are racist, at the core. Currently, he mentioned these groups here, they work with these white vigilante groups and people who have, for the longest time, have been trying to find a loophole to create almost like an enclave or a second Urania in the Western Cape. And we're saying as the EFF, we're not blind to these utterances, which are basically masquerading as, bringing positive, developmental outcomes, masquerading as promising that people will be uplifted from their poverty-stricken conditions, under which they've been subjected by the current government, by the way. So we're not blinded, by these, because we know that it's a sloganeering, and he's saying that his party will take over. Where will it take over? Probably they will take a government on the moon. They are declining, and their numbers, the statistics are showing that in fact the Democratic Alliance is declining, and right now they are running like headless chickens because of a number of statements that they've made, and especially on the issue of Palestine. So the residents of the Western Cape are very clear. He is saying that the residents of the Western Cape, have given them a mandate. Who are those people? He's referring to those, exclusive white, racists, and those people who do not really want to be part and parcel of any black government in this country. And we know that the genesis of that mentality comes from a long tradition of racists who have never really been wanted to be associated with any black government in this country. And as the EFF was saying, we must look through these layers of racism because the Democratic Alliance itself has never been honest when it comes to, to issues of being transparent.
But
and they are saying that, they want to find this
Dr. Wandile, the DA can argue that at least for the past national elections, the majority of the people of the Western Cape have voted for them. So they've not delivered a black government.
Yeah, but where are they now? They're declining. They are declining now. And that's why they are trying to make a 360-degree on certain statements. Because they know very well that, their racist approach to development is not going to sustain them. They develop areas that are already developed in the Western Cape. Go to the black townships. People, they live under inhumane conditions in the Western Cape. And they only, develop areas that are well developed. They only protect areas that are well protected. And we are saying as the EFF, we cannot have a development that is, administered, along color lines, development of powers that are basically distributed asymmetrically. So we reject, this bill because it sets grounds for them to make, to almost create, an enclave where they will do as they wish. Yeah. And by the way, there isn't any provision in the Constitution, that allows for any province to opt out of South Africa as they wish and declare itself as a state, because that's where it's going to go. So, they will, at the moment, they may say no because they are masquerading. We know the agenda. There is an agenda behind.
How do you expose, if you're saying there is a smoke screen here for, as you put it, cessation and creating a whole separate state? How do you expose the smoke screen?
It's simply because their leaders have been in and out of South Africa, having meetings with the United States, and selling this idea of a separate Western Cape. Learning, for example, from the countries, projects such as your Brexit and so on. So we have been watching them closely. They have been usurping funds so that this project would be funded by imperialist countries. And when they then get those, funding from these imperialist countries, then they'll be able to, to establish. In fact, this is actually, it comes from narrow political interest, driven by people who have no interest really on the poor. They have no interest in developing or in actually elevating people from poverty.
Right.
All what they are doing, they are basically protecting their own interest. And as the EFF, we are seeing through those, those lies. As Amilcar Cabral tell us, we must tell no lies, and we must actually confront lies whenever they show their ugly face. So this is basically what we are doing. And we are saying to the residents of the Western Cape, they must reject this vehemently. They must reject even the people who are supporting this bill because of the fact that it has no developmental, outcomes for the poor, other than it setting us back many decades ago when South Africa was under the yoke of apartheid. This is what it's going to establish eventually.
Thanks, Mr. Wandile. Let me bring you in, dear Cameron. I mean, Dr. Ivan is saying we don't have to get approval from the ANC, quite honestly, on this bill. They're an outgoing government. There'll be a new government at national who will look at this bill, and that's why we're going ahead with it.
Yeah. Well, you see, that underlines exactly what they want to achieve with this bill. It's like an electioneering exercise for them. And his statement there is actually, as the EFF colleague said, more difficult than landing on the moon. I can tell you now that the DA and their moonshot right-wing fascist alliance is not going to win this election. They're going to lose this election. In the Western Cape, the polling is indicated, our work on the ground, that the DA in the Western Cape, because of their failures to use the powers that they already have, is going to go under 50%. And that's why they're panicking, because they want to consolidate the right-wing support. But I just want to say that in this debate so far, we've clarified that the bill is unconstitutional. You've asked the question to Mr. Meyer, and he said by his silence, they don't have any legal opinion. So it's clear that this bill is unconstitutional. The second thing we've argued, they have powers, but they're not using them. Let me give you two examples. Budget that comes from National for Human Settlements. In this financial year, 215 million rand was returned in the human settlements budget. There was 170 million rand irregular expenditure. 3 years ago, the city of Cape Town returned 1.2 billion rand that they got from National to upgrade informal settlements. Yeah. Why do they not want to use that particular money?
But they're not asking for devolving powers in human settlement. It's mostly true.
No, but I'm just saying they're failing. Our second argument, they are failing to use the powers that they have. But let's talk about trade here. I think Mr. Meyer actually doesn't know what he's talking about. He can go and meet with Ibrahim Patel to look at all the trade agreements, besides AGOA.
How do you rebut that there are no...
it's a lie. It's actually false. We have trade agreements with AGOA. We have trade agreements with the European countries. We have trade agreements with Russia. You know what happened in the Western Cape? When they took a position around the Ukraine war, and they were going off, they didn't realize the impact on trade. Whatever one's view on what is going on there, the farmers of the Western Cape stood up and said, but listen, we are exporting to Russia. We are exporting to Russia. And then we had a situation where when it came to the Palestinian issue, we wanted to debate, for instance, because they're now talking trade, international relations. They refused a debate in the legislature on the Palestinian issue. They put up the Ukrainian colors. That's got nothing to do with trade. He doesn't know what he's talking about. We have trade agreements. Secondly, when he wants to talk about the harbors, the trade agreements that Minister Didiza and others have entered into have resulted in greater exports to the East and other markets.
Farmers are losing millions.
Anyone would agree that the state of our ports is not acceptable. Anyone will agree with that, and that needs to be sorted out. But what they would rather do is issue press statement after press statement, as opposed to actually working on a solution. It's wrong. We have to sort this out. The President, the Minister, everyone has said that. He wants to talk about corruption. I would want to submit that the President of the African National Congress and the President of the country, Cyril Ramaphosa, has, with the NEC, introduced step aside. If you are charged with anything, you step aside. You know that the DA, if their members are charged, they don't have to step aside. They have counsellors who are charged that just continue. If you look at what's happened with the National Prosecuting Authority, the more effective operation of the Hawks, you can see that the renewal agenda of the ANC. But we must understand corruption is there in the business sector. It's in often religious communities. It's all over. But the commitment, I think the renewal agenda of the ANC has begun. But we would be the first to say that it's actually unacceptable. But let me give you another example. Talk about national policy, provincial policy. Nationally, in NEDLAC, approved by Parliament, minimum wage. Because the wage commission determined it, and now it's something between 4,500 and 4,500. Do you know that the Democratic Alliance, so-called Concern for the Poor, has in their own written policy saying that the minimum wage should be 1,800 rand with an opt-out clause for employees. So if you say, I'm prepared to accept 900 rand, that you should be able to. So that is, imagine a DA with these powers and the implications, which would create chaos. They are trying to divide African from colored, the black community broadly defined, African, colored, and Indian. Their only way to survive is to instill fear. You take the Department of the Premier, look at representativity. Do you know that there are 66 senior managers there, directors and above? Of those, there are 2 African people, and the colored people in the Department of the Premier are underrepresented.
We've had that argument, that debate. They say they're on merit. They are not. It's not catered deployment.
That's what they say.
They bring people who are qualified to occupy positions. That's professionalization.
You mean that's what the DA's fit is? Well, Helen Zille's fit for purpose is there are competent officials in the colored community, in the African community, in the white community, but build that inclusivity. Do you know that Helen Zille actually made a statement that there are not enough qualified colored people? You know, so they are trapped in this apartheid colonial legacy. This bill is unconstitutional. They're not using the powers that they have, yet they're asking for more. No wonder the Democratic Alliance is losing support. They don't know where to turn. They tried Musi Maimane, he failed. Now they're trying John Steenhuisen. Helen Zille is unhappy that John Steenhuisen got personality of a mole. No, John Steenhuisen got the personality of a mole, and he was racist the other day. Panyaza Lusufi, our premier, is trying to bring in the wardens, and he made a racist stereotypical. He said, oh, you're pulling people out of shebeens. Is that not racist? Is that not the apartheid legacy? John Steenhuisen is losing votes for the DA. They don't know what to do anymore. Dr.
Meyer, let's bring you in here. 2 things as we wrap up. There is no developmental outcome for the poor in this bill, but 2, you already have powers. You're just misusing the powers that you already have.
Well, firstly, it's very clear to me that I'm debating with people who haven't read this bill. So that's why this is a limitation on this discussion. Because the purpose of this bill is to create a framework for devolving certain powers of the Western Cape Provincial government and the provincial legislature that is within the framework of the current constitution. The Western Cape is part of South Africa, will remain part of South Africa, welcome all people. There's a big in-migration. We welcome people. We also have seen in the fourth quarter of 2022 that 98% of all the jobs created in South Africa were created in the Western Cape. In the other 8 provinces, only 2% of the jobs were created. What does that tell you? That this is a government that care for the poor, because the majority of people that have access to those jobs were the poor black people here in the Western Cape. 98% got jobs, 2% in the rest of the country. Then there for me very important, the lowest unemployment figures in South Africa is in the Western Cape. Well, we have the best human development index that measures inequality. The least inequality exists, according to the reports, here in the Western Cape. So all these stories of these two gentlemen is factually incorrect, because the evidence, the facts, the data just shows absolutely different. What this is all about is the Democratic Alliance is committed to the constitutional democracy, the rule of law, non-racialism, a social market economy, and the protection of property rights. That is what this is about. All these other matters that was now introduced in this debate has no reference to this debate, because this debate is not about, like they discussed here, it's not about new powers. It's about existing powers that must be devolved to either a local government or a provincial government. And I've identified now the specific area. But
it's been argued that those powers, as you're saying, not new powers, but those powers exist already. You have not used them effectively.
No, but the Constitution say that those powers that I now refer to is not our powers. It is powers that is the responsibility, trade, harvest, export, electricity, policing, public transport. Those are powers of the national government, but they are failing South Africans miserably. Everybody wants to be part of South Africa, but nobody wants to be part of an ANC failed state.
But
this is what this
sorry,
is
Dr.
about.
Meyer, because of time, I'm going to push you there a little bit. Have you, as Cameron has been arguing, approached President Cyril Ramaphosa with valid proposals and plans on what you want to do with those areas, and have those been rejected?
Well, we are meeting on a regular basis through different structures, through the MINMEX, where the MECs meet with their counterparts. We discuss some of these matters. Sometimes they give in, sometimes we make progress. We have also the PCC, which is the President Coordinating Council. Our Premier, Alan Windey, normally go and take some matters to the President. He has taken, for example, the issue of the harbors. He has discussed it. But I don't know if our President is tired. He simply does nothing. We gave him a file with all the issues that we said is hampering service delivery in South Africa. We want not the Western Cape to succeed. We want South Africa to succeed. And that's why we are willing to cooperate. But it seems that the President of South Africa has already retired on the job. The man is simply tired. He's nowhere. Making speeches is not leadership. Action is leadership. And that's why in the Western Cape we have identified one town, Riversdale, that will soon be free from load shedding. We say, stop talking, put action to the matter. And so for us here in the Western Cape, we are proudly South African, but we are saying enough of the 30 years of failure. We will take the cooperation that we get from the national government, but we will not take your hand to pull us down.
Right.
Because this is what South Africa is currently. No water in some municipalities, no electricity, no refuse collection. I get some messages from people from other provinces. For the last 10 days, they had no water, no electricity, no sanitation. This is a failed state. Some ANC municipalities have 2 mayors, 2 speakers. Where is this good governance? Where is this president? I think the president, his time is up. He must go.
All right, Dr. Wandile, I'll give you the final bite. it seems you've got your developmental goals upside down. The Western Cape, lowest unemployment, least inequality. They're creating jobs for close to 98% compared to the 2% in other provinces.
Yeah, I don't know where this gentleman lives, because the Western Cape, in fact, nothing has improved here for the poorest of the poor and the working class. And what they are trying to hide here, they are hiding a very nefarious project. In fact, one could even characterize this as, they are trying to almost create a, what I would call a white Bantustan arrangement, but using some clandestine, methods to arrive at a specific logical conclusion. So we're saying to them, to the Democratic Alliance, there's no easiest, shortcuts. If you want to run the country, you must go and contest elections. There are no shortcuts here. You have a legal opinion on the matter, a couple of legal opinions on the matter, and you come here and tell us that this is constitutional. We are telling you now there is no constitutional provision for any province within the borders of the Republic of South Africa to opt out of South Africa and declare itself as a state, which is what this bill sets grounds for. So we are saying there is a legal opinion, and it seems to be that, this is basically a waste of resources. Because if there's a legal opinion, and which is basically detailed, and it tells you that within the spirit of unity upon which the Constitution was built, there is no such a provision. And in fact, you are actually failing, the residents of the Western Cape with the little powers, or with the powers that you have. You have not actually been able to, to take our people out of a poverty, stricken conditions in which they are in the Western Cape. Go to the townships. Go to where people live on a daily basis, in places where there are broken drainage systems. Go to places where children actually, sleep without, food. Go to school on an empty stomach. I don't know where you live, sir, because it seems to me that you seem to be imagining things here in the Western Cape. You have actually failed the people of the province. And it is you who should actually be reading the writing on the wall. The writing is on the wall. Mene tekelu farsin. Your days are numbered here in the Western Cape. The EFF will actually, increase its numbers, and we will show you what it means to run a government. In fact, we've actually realized that most of you are telling people not to vote for us because of one thing. You're saying don't vote for EFF because EFF will do exactly what it says it will do. In fact, we will do exactly what we say we will do in our manifesto. So we are saying to the residents of the Western Cape, we should not accept this bill because it seeks to actually establish, it brings in the spectre of apartheid. And soon, we'll see, people running this province as if we're actually in the 80s. And we must reject that. We're not actually moving backwards. We're moving forward. And we're not going to accept even statements. In fact, this bill is also, it creates, it actually, it puts into action what their leader, Helen Zille, said a couple of years ago that, black people are basically
finally, as we wrap up, will you be participating in the public hearings?
We will participate in the public hearings, and we have actually, given instruction to the ground forces to reject this bill, and we're saying this to all progressive forces of the left to reject this bill, all opposition parties to reject this bill, and the residents of the Western Cape and people of goodwill, we are saying to them they must reject this bill because it has no developmental outcomes for the poorest.
I appreciate your time. Let's leave it there. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are completely out of time. Let me take some quick WhatsApp messages that have come through and your views on this conversation on 072-110-5584. Let's have a look at what you're saying. All right, this one from Anonymous. It's said today that the white leaders in the Democratic Alliance believe colored people cannot see through their strategy to bring back racism in the Western Cape. Be alert, be aware of this danger to South Africa. This is from Mario Filenda. The DA is trying to blindfold the whole of the Western Cape, however, specifically our colored people. The government must, by all means, not allow this to happen.